Welcome to Empower Hour, your go-to podcast for all things disability and independence, brought to you by Empowerabilities, your disability and aging experts. I'm co-host Afton Harper.
And I'm Julie Jordan. Listen in as we dive into real stories, resources, and meaningful conversations that empower individuals with disabilities to live life to the fullest.
Whether you're tuning in for advocacy, inspiration, or practical tips, you're in the right place.
This is Empower Hour, because independence isn't a destination, it's a journey.
I want to take a minute to tell you about some of the services we offer here at Empowerabilities. We're all about helping people with disabilities live as independently as they want. That could mean helping someone find housing, navigate Medicare, get connected with benefits, or learn skills for daily living. We offer individual case management, advocacy, peer support, and information and referral. Basically, we help people find what they need and figure out how to get it. We also have home modifications, like ramps, grab bars, or walker steps, plus assistive technology, recycled medical equipment, and if you need a hearing aid, we can help with that too. Everything from evaluations to repairs. And for those who need a little extra help at home, we offer consumer-directed services and veterans-directed care, things like transportation and meal prep, housekeeping and personal care. But it's not all services and paperwork. We also host social clubs, support groups, and community events, so people can connect, have fun, and build relationships. Because independence doesn't mean isolation. So if any of that sounds like something you or someone you care about might be interested in, give us a call or check out our website at empowerabilities.org. We're here to help, and we love what we do.
Welcome to another edition of Empower Hour, brought to you by Empowerabilities. I'm Julie Jordan, and joined by co-host
Afton Harper.
Yeah, hello, Afton.
Hello.
Well, so today we're talking about something that impacts all of us every single day, because around here, if you don't like it, just wait a minute and it's going to change. We're talking about all things weather today. So from spring storms to everyday planning, we are joined by KY3's Chief Meteorologist, Ron Hearst, to help us stay safe, prepared, and informed. So hello, Ron.
Well, hello, and thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, we're always excited to bring in experts in different topics that we know nothing about, and trying to educate our consumers on safety and things that can better their lives in the community. So,
all right, well, I'll see what I can do to help.
All right, so let's just kick it off here. Storms coming in today, possibly, so it might be a very timely situation, but spring in the Ozarks can be really unpredictable. So are you seeing any particular patterns this year different from any other year?
Well, we've had a lot of humidity. I mean, that's the first thing. Big Bermuda high is set up, so we have high pressure somewhere Florida or just east of Florida. And so the air rotates clockwise around those systems, and so that's bringing up a lot of moisture from the Gulf. So you may have noticed the humidity levels rise here in the last week or so. As far as, the jet stream, I mean, we've had some systems that have come in and have kind of anchored themselves off California. And so those are throwing little disturbances across the mountains and the plains. We'll kind of have to, when you're talking about storms, it's very small features that fire those things up. So it's really not huge synoptic scale events. It's really more something that's less than that. So, we're talking things of several hundred miles, and sometimes those are hard to identify or time or predict.
I would not want to be a meteorologist just for the fact because you predict something and it doesn't come, or if you don't predict it, it does come, and it kind of puts you in a sticky situation.
Well, it can do that, that's for sure. It can do that.
So do you see that we're expecting any active weather patterns this season, more unusual?
So I think that you have to understand that we're now in the heart of storm season. And so here in the Ozarks, severe weather season typically runs from about the last 2 weeks of March to about the first 2 weeks in June. And so we are now starting to get into that. The peak is going to be somewhere in very early May. And of course, as you know from living in the Ozarks, that is a pretty peak season. So I don't know that we're seeing anything unusual. We're seeing things as they should be. There's actually a second severe weather season too. For your listeners, it comes really at the end of November and early December. It's only about a 2-week period, but that's when you get these really cold air masses coming out of Canada. You still have some warm air lingering around here, and we get those what we call blue northers, where the temperature drops pretty dramatically. And so that air mass change can fuel some pretty severe thunderstorms as well. But those are the main seasons. Keep in mind, in the Ozarks, I've been here 40 years now, or pretty close to it, and I've seen. We had a year, I don't log years and stuff like that, but we had a year where one week we'd have tornadoes, and the next week we had a foot of snow, and the following week we had tornadoes, and the next week we had another foot of snow. So we really have to stay on our toes all 12 months for bad weather here.
All right. So is there one misconception that people have about spring storms?
Well, I think that people have like a really high anxiety, right? And they freak out, oh my gosh, Ron said there's going to be storms, or Brandon said there's going to be tornadoes. And while it deserves respect, it doesn't rise to the level of panic. The chances of getting hit by a single tornado are once every 10,000 years.
Really?
And so you have to sort of bring down that anxiety level, because when we're on TV or the National Weather Service issues a warning, we really need people to be thinking straight. We don't need them to be panicking, and we need them to make good decisions, because, we can't make all of your decisions for you. And so you need to be able to listen to the instructions or listen to the information, process that information, and then make the decision to save the life of you and your family. And so it's not worth getting all bent out of shape for. It is worth respecting. It's worth listening to. It's worth staying up to date. But again, we need to bring that down so people can think clearly. The other thing I would say is that people don't have a really good grasp of the difference between a watch and a warning. And so when we say watch, people are like, watch out, here it comes. Well, that's, yes, you can say that. But really, a watch is something that's not a call to action. It is a message to stay alert, to monitor your surroundings, to pay attention to television, radio, or weather radio, to have some way to get information. And the atmosphere is conditional to be able to produce strong to severe thunderstorms and or tornadoes. So it is just it's a precursor, it's a heads up that, okay, now we need to start paying attention to what's going on around us. The warning is always much stronger, right? It's a call to action. It's a warning, right? Red lights go off, sirens go off, and things like that. So when you hear the word warning, that's your call to action. That's the time to take shelter. That's the time to perk up your ears, to pay attention to the television set. It may not be for your county, but you may be next. So those are a couple of things that I think that I want to stress to folks.
Well, that's kind of a perfect transition to my next question. So when severe weather does hit, what are a few things that people should do pretty quickly or immediately when they get that alert?
Well, I think when we're talking about people who have disabilities, I think that they need to be a little more aware, right? Because they're going to need a little more time if they need to go seek shelter at a public storm shelter. If they don't have some place to get to, they'll need to gather their belongings together, have a storm safety kit handy, to practice actually going to those places and to being comfortable, to be able to situate yourself in that environment where you're taking shelter. And so, that's probably one of the first things they need to do is to do that. And then the shelter they take really depends upon their accommodations. And, if you have an apartment, you'll want to move to an interior hallway, for example, or a small closet. That'll offer more protection. If the facility has a storm shelter, of course, you'll want to go there. If it requires getting on the elevator, be aware that if the power goes out, you don't want to be stuck on the elevator, so you have to be able to manage the staircase. And they may need extra time to get to the basement and to situate themselves down there. So again, it becomes a little bit more difficult. Sometimes we can't give everybody 15 or 20 minutes worth of warning because they happen very quickly. But the idea is that when the watch is issued, for them to then start gathering their materials and their storm safety kit, yet make sure they're properly dressed, make sure they're monitoring either radio or television. And, that way when they learn not only their county or their community, but the county next to them and the counties surrounding them, and to stay aware. So if in Springfield, for example, if it's in Lawrence County, we need to be ready to move. It's in Stone County or Christian County, we need to be ready to take shelter and make sure we do that on a moment's notice, and maybe even start moving there a little bit early just to give ourselves that extra time.
Yeah.
Do storms usually come from one direction all the time, or is it varied?
Well, it can be varied. Typically around here, they move basically in a west to east direction or some modification of that. Occasionally they will come out of the northwest, but that's not typical. Occasionally they will come from the south, although again, that's not typical. They'll move in some sort of a south-southwest, east-northeast kind of direction, but it's some sort of a west to east type of motion generally, and that's because of the latitude that we are on the earth.
That's how I always judge. If it's maybe towards Joplin or Oklahoma, then I know it might be coming this direction,
Sure.
And that's kind of how I judge mine.
Mm-hmm.
When thinking about putting together that storm ready kit, I would also, this isn't more of a question but more of a statement, but think about like what you use every day too. Like, do you need your inhaler? Do you need your crutches? Do you need a communication device? Then make sure it's charged or make sure it's nearby.
Well, I think all of those are very good things. The Red Cross actually has a list of items that they put in the storm safety kit. I would say for the folks that are the main listening audience here, certainly medication is one of them. Have some sort of a whistle, because if you do get into a building that collapses, you'll want people to find you and know where to search for you. You'll want to have some sort of communication and weather radio, maybe some extra batteries, maybe some food. Those are things that are all very important. If you have a pet, you'll want to have something to occupy them, to bring them with you. And if you have small children, you want things to occupy them as well. So, if you live in a community, hopefully the community can kind of share. You don't need to pack everything together versus somebody who lives in a more rural area. And then it might include diapers and toys and bottled water, things like that, tarps, tape. Those kind of things become important for your storm safety kit in that respect.
So when you hear that watch coming, that's the time to grab your safety kits, have them ready should that warning be issued.
Correct.
We also like to encourage our folks to know where they could go if they don't have a basement, or if they live in a mobile home or something like. Where is your nearest shelter, and make sure that you are checking those things to make sure it's accessible to you.
Yes. So let's talk about shelters. So we've seen an uptick in public shelters. And you'll find that those shelters typically are not published, and there's a reason for that. And that is that the storm doesn't care about traffic laws, right? The storm goes from point A to point B, and it doesn't matter what's in between. We have to abide by the traffic laws, by other people that are out there, by people around us. And so if you are going to rely on a public storm shelter, as soon as that watch is issued, then you probably should consider moving to that public storm shelter. It may cause you to be there for hours with nothing to happen, but that's the chance you take. Mm-hmm. You really cannot wait until that warning is issued to decide that you need to go to your public storm shelter. You may not make it. You're going to have stoplights, stop signs, other traffic. You're going to get caught in flying debris. We worry that while the building may be safe for the residents, you may have 50 cars in the parking lot, and then nobody has a way to get home, or they get impaled against the door and you can't get out. So it is always best, in my opinion, to have several different places to take shelter, and again to practice those. So let's run through them. If you have a dwelling with a basement, or a storm shelter, and then that's the best place to go, especially underground. You'll want to go to the center or the northeast portion of that basement. And the reason for that is as the storm comes in from the southwest, it will typically lift the dwelling or shift it to the northeast. And keep in mind that even in the Joplin tornado, St. John's Hospital was actually shifted off its foundation. So, they can be very strong. If you are in that northeast corner, you will have at least an opportunity to have something over your head. Whereas if you're in the west, south, or southwest corners of the basement, typically the foundation is moved away and you're now subject to flying debris. So if you have a basement, we suggest getting under something sturdy. Many people have a bar, pool table, set of stairs, a heavy dining room table. Take shelter under that in case there's flying debris, so you'll want pillows and blankets there. You'll also want to stay away from anything that catch fire. So typically you'll have a hot water heater, furnace, fuse boxes are often found in the basement, and you'll want to find a way that you're going to be as far away from those as possible to keep you from getting electrocuted or from getting burned should there be a fire. So that's a house with a shelter. Now, if we move to a single-family home, say 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 2-car garage, if you can afford to put in a shelter when you build the dwelling, then that's the best thing. There are some models that they do anchor to the concrete in the garages. That can be good. There are some companies that actually put them in the garage floor. I'm not quite a fan of those because the car may be parked in the garage. The oil could leak, and you may have, fumes or something in that thing because all those fumes are heavy gases and they get down there. So also that means you have to now move the car outside, which means it could be subjected to hail or wind, and then have to come back in to get into your storm shelter. So I'm not as crazy about those. But again, you'll want to move to the center of the house. You'll want to put as many walls between you and the outside.
Close-in walls?
You want close walls, and the reason for that is they're more structurally sound. I've driven a lot of these tornado paths. The one that's really memorable is the Pier City to Battlefield tornado back in like 2004. Went down ZZ Highway over in Marionville, and when you went and you saw all of those houses that were hit one after another, it was always the pantry, the interior bathroom, or an interior closet was left standing. And so those walls are they're 2 feet by 4 feet or something like that. And so the structure of those 2x4s and stuff in there usually makes that a lot sounder. Plus, the wind will rip away everything on the outside of the house first and the roof before it'll get to the interior section. So that actually gives you a little extra. You'll want to get as low as possible, bring in pillows and blankets, make sure you turn the sound up on your television set or your radio so that you can hear the instructions if you can't take it with you. You'll want to, if you have an interior bathroom, you can climb into the tub. The walls of the tub will actually give you a little more support. So you can put the children in there with a pillow and blanket so they can at least relax and recline.
Unless you have glass doors on your tub or shower.
Well, yeah, but again, you're looking at the room, right? Because we're trying to stay away from outside windows, and we do that because things in the yard will become flying missiles. Your potted plants, your garden tools, your bird bath, your trampoline. I mean,
we've seen that.
The trampoline flying through the sky and things like that. Just basically sticks and rocks, though, will become flying missiles. And if they penetrate that glass, then we don't want people to get hurt. And while I am concerned about glass doors on a shower, typically they're not really glass or some sort of plexiglass.
Tempered, yeah.
And so, you have to choose the best of all evils, right? And so there are people in Joplin that did everything right and still perished. So what we're trying to do with all of these rules is we're trying to increase the odds of survival. I can't guarantee it because I don't know the size of the storm. So again, going to the best place increases that chance of survival. If you have a 2-story home, make sure you go down to the lowest level. If you live in an apartment, you'll also want to go to the lowest level. And in most apartments, the bathrooms in each apartment are actually adjoining. And they do that because they bring the plumbing up and then they split it off 4 ways. And so typically those areas are also more structurally sound. And they're in the interior sections of whatever apartments. And if you ever really think about it and you start looking at your apartment, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So you get into that bathroom and shut the door. If you have kids, bring them down, make sure they're downstairs, they're not stuck in their room somewhere. You know exactly where they are, make sure everybody's dressed, has shoes on. We hear lots of stories about people who have damage in the middle of the night. They have to get out. There's broken glass. There's splinters because the wood is torn apart. You have metal fragments, fencing, barbed wire. We just don't want people to make the matter worse. So make sure that you're dressed. If you have some sort of a helmet, we want you to protect your head, a bicycle helmet, motorcycle helmet. I mean, I know it sounds, you don't really want to do it. But, if you're alone, who's going to see you, right? So don't be shy. Protect your head. That's your most important organ that you've got to protect. And so do those things to actually protect yourself. If you have the old modular home, mobile home, we think of those on wheels. There's not really that many of them left. There are a few around here. I know there's a mobile home park between here and Republic. There's also one out in Rogersville. You'll want to evacuate those. They're not sturdy. And I know that some of them are tied down and they have ratings to 110 miles an hour or whatever, but they're just really not that structurally sound. And you're best to leave those, again, as soon as the watch is issued and find more substantial structure. Don't wait till the warning is issued. You may not be able to get to where you need to go. Now, the new modular homes that they build in a factory and then they piece together on site, some of those actually aren't too bad. They're as structurally sound as a single-family home that's built on site. They can have 6-inch walls, for example, and where you put the adjoining rooms together after you've prefabbed them, you can actually have an 8-inch wall, or you can have an 8-inch stud, and so that's going to be a really secure location to keep the dwelling from being torn apart.
We actually went and looked at those this weekend, and they were explaining all that to us, how much better they are built these days than in the past.
And then if they're anchored to concrete, and when I say anchored, I don't mean just set on there. I mean actually bolted down into some sort of concrete. So those become much sturdier and much safer type of dwellings. Now, there's one thing that's been cropping up lately that I do want to talk about, because in your position here, we often speak of affordable housing, right? And so apartments are getting to be outrageous. Some are going for $1,000 or more a month. Some people don't have the means to do that. And what I'm finding, at least in the rural areas, is some people are going to those companies that you see by the side of the road that build sheds. And they look very nice these days. They have a front door, a couple of windows, some come with a porch. Some have a little garage door access in the back, and they're very affordable. They run somewhere between $4,000 and $5,000 up to about $15,000, depending upon the size. Most of them are unfinished, but people are buying those as dwellings now, and they're finishing themselves. They're actually living them. They're using for hunting cabins or whatever. Mother-in-law cabins. There was a gentleman that I know who is a neighbor to my fiance. He's a little bit on the autistic scale. He's in his 50s. His parents are still alive. And he wanted to be independent. And so his dad bought him one of those. And of course, this gentleman thought that he was going to actually move in there and stay there, but his dad eventually sold it. But the idea is that people are living in those, and they're very unsafe. And we have to treat those as if they're like the old mobile homes. And so, if you're going to purchase one of those dwellings as a shelter, you'll want to make sure that when they anchor it, it's actually a poured foundation and it's bolted down. And you'll want to evacuate that as soon as the watch is issued. And so we need to address that. I'm not against, affordable housing. I think that people need what they need to do to keep a roof over their head and food in their stomach. But I also want to address the safety issue on that as well.
Go ahead, Afton.
Oh, I was just going to ask, are there any common misconceptions or mistakes that people might make during these severe weather events?
Just not paying attention. We've come to be so acclimated or insulated to the fact that a tornado warning is issued and nothing's happened, that we get conditioned that it's not going to happen to me or nothing's going to happen this time. And, I think that's a false sense of security. And so really each time people really need to check in and they need to take it seriously because, while we might know that the day might produce tornadoes, we don't know whether it's going to be a smaller tornado or Joplin-sized tornado. I can't really always predict that. And so the Joplin tornado was actually 2 tornadic thunderstorms that merged. And so because the thunderstorms are really a big bubble of air, they're just huge, powerful bubbles of air. When they do merge like that, and when bubbles merge, and if you think of just, we take dish soap, right? We blow bubbles. Sometimes they stick together, right? Well, these storms will do that. And for a very brief period, it's actually 1 + 1 = 2. And so what will happen is the storm will have a doubling of strength and a doubling of size. And so that's why that tornado becomes so large so fast. And it's not until that storm actually sheds some of that energy that we'll actually get that tornado or get that hail size to come back down to something that's a little more reasonable for the atmosphere.
So one area we didn't talk about was if you're traveling in your car, in your
Okay.
vehicle. Let's talk about that scenario. What's the safest thing to do if you're traveling?
Well, again, certainly I'm a little bit biased, but downloading the KY3 First Alert Weather app, there is a follow me feature on that under the settings. And so it will actually give you warnings for across the country. And that is part of the problem, is that when people are on vacation, they don't know what county they're in Tennessee or Georgia or Florida or Texas or wherever. And so, how do you get that warning? How do you know what your surroundings are? Are you sure you're traveling north? It might be northwest, it might be northeast. You may have hit a curve and for a while be traveling back to the south and west. So you can become disoriented. And, especially if you're traveling at night. And so it's best to have some way to get local watches and warnings wherever you are. The KY3 Weather app will do that for you. There are others out there that also will. But again, I'm partial to KY3 First Alert Weather app. And the other thing is that I've placed certain things on that app, such as there's a trucking and travel forecast, right? And you might say, well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, on that app, I put all of the warnings and watches from the Rocky Mountains to the Appalachians. And so anybody traveling throughout the center part of the country can get those warnings on their phone and actually see a depiction of it, as well as get the actual alert when whatever local weather service serves that area issues a warning. All right, so, cars are by themselves flying missiles, okay? A tornado has no problem with taking them up and taking them off into the beyond. So we encourage people to evacuate them. Again, if we start talking about increasing the odds of survival, there's actually some debate as to, do I want to leave the car and go into a ditch? Because when I'm in the ditch, I really don't have any protection around me. I don't have any metal. The cars now all have airbags. So if the car is rolled, it's probably going to inflate the airbags, and you're going to have some method of protection there, although I would still abandon it. But again, we're talking about worst case scenario. What do I do? If you're in a ditch, you have to worry about flooding. You're subjected to the elements. You too can be carried off unless you're something to grab onto.
I was thinking about human missiles, yeah.
Do you actually go into a culvert? If you can and it's safe, I would probably choose that. Although, you have to be careful which way is the wind blowing. Oftentimes those things become wind tunnels and the wind accelerates through there. Back in the 70s, there was actually a video of people who took shelter under a bridge. And the tornado passed by and everybody was safe and the cars were okay. And for a while, that was a big thing. We'll take shelter under a bridge. But back in one of the first more tornadoes in Oklahoma, it actually struck the bridge and with devastating impacts. People were out of their vehicles. They got sucked out from the bridge. They didn't have anything to hang on to. The cars all got swept away. The wind accelerated through the bridge, making it even more difficult. So I wouldn't take shelter under a bridge. So I guess the best thing is to look for some sort of brick and mortar structure or some public storm shelter that you can go to and abandon the vehicle for that kind of shelter. So that would be my best get. If you have to be driving and you're out on the open range, you want to drive at right angles to the tornado. That's provided you can see the tornado and you have a good idea of which way it's moving. You'll note that a few years ago we had some guys get killed chasing a tornado in Oklahoma. They got too close to it, and the storm made a sudden right-hand turn. It did kind of a bowling ball hook kind of thing, and it got them. And so you'll not want to do that. And so you'll want to kind of stay away from those kind of things. And I actually get a lot of kids who come up to me and say, "Oh man, I want to go chase tornadoes," and there's nothing legally we can do to stop them. It's just that I think there are some places that if you don't have some sort of a degree or whatever, some proper training, I think you can be fined or arrested for being a public nuisance because they have tied up traffic and really created very dangerous situations.
What about those photo fanatics? The first thing they do is they grab their camera. They're outside on their porch looking for the storm.
Yeah.
Any advice for them?
Again, I can't, I do that too. I can't keep
Guilty.
up doing
Yeah.
that. But again, I'm doing it from a perspective. I know which way the storm's going. And I'm going to put myself in a position. And so I would recommend that folks that find themselves doing that take a spotter course. To learn about the motions of storms and how to put themselves at the proper angle to get the best photo. But yeah, if you don't know what you're doing, you need to abandon things. And the other thing too that I find from my days as a photographer is that when you're looking through the lens, it becomes surreal. It becomes like you're watching television, and you don't pay attention to what's actually happening around you. You get mesmerized by what you see, and you really have to, in those cases, actually have two eyes open, and so, and realize when it's actually time to give that up and run.
Mm-hmm.
I have a less extreme case of this, but it's similar. I was on the yearbook team in high school, and there was a not extreme weather, but it's that looking through a television kind of feeling. There was one of the football players, like one of the quarterbacks, was running toward me in the corner of the field, and I'm looking through it, and I'm like, this is such a cool shot, and then I'm like, he's getting closer. And he actually tackled the
on the ground
photographer next to me. So I was really lucky to not be tackled, but I happened to look up and I realized how close he was. So
right, yeah, you lose all sense of perspective, and that actually happened to me too. I was a photographer in my first job, and they were coming down the line, and they kept coming, and I wound up at the bottom of the pile. So yeah, it's a good shot though.
Biggest weather myth you'd love to bust?
I don't know that I know of anything right offhand.
Okay.
If you have something, we can talk about it, but I don't.
Nothing that people automatically assume that usually is not the case. Tornadoes always hit in a certain area.
Well, there's, we get that, I guess. People say, well, I live in the mountains or I live in the hills. And all I have to do is point to Clinton, Arkansas. That was the longest on-the-ground tornado track in the state of Arkansas. It was over 200 miles. When you actually got into Clinton, I don't know, have you ever been to Clinton?
Mm-hmm, I have.
Okay. So when you go into Clinton, you go to the town, you cross the creek, and you go up the hill. And there's one of those old steak places on the right-hand side of the road. If you're there in that parking lot and you look back to the northeast, you'll see where the trees are still, and it goes up and down the hill and down the hill and up the hill and down the hill, and it can certainly go through mountain passes. They've been recorded in Colorado. So, living next to a lake or living next to a hill or on the other side of the hill, you're really not as safe as you think you are.
What I really don't understand is you see the images of demolition. Everything around you is demolished, but one house seems to be standing. How does that happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. You can have within the main funnel, you can have these mesovortices. So you have like 4 or 5 tornadoes within the main funnel, right? So you have main suction vortices. As they spin and develop, and you're talking about an atmosphere that swirls. If we were to swirl the water in your tub, you'd create these things, and they fizzle out and move off to the side, and some of them stay together, and they do that within the atmosphere. And you have to remember that the atmosphere is fluid, and that, it's not a fluid of water, but it's a fluid of air. And so these things can do that. As to what, leaves one house standing and the next house gone, you get into a period in the tornado where it's in the rope phase, and it can go one way and swing back the other way, and things happen.
Luck.
Yeah.
Total luck.
Mm-hmm. Or hand of God.
Yeah. What else do you have, Afton?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to know, what's your favorite part about reporting, forecasting in the Ozarks?
My job is to not necessarily forecast the weather, but it's to make your life comfortable. And really, I make your life comfortable by having a proper forecast. If I do that, you'll know how to plan your day, you'll know how to dress. Sometimes making your life comfortable means saving your life. So that's how I look at it. But the thing is that there is a right answer for tomorrow. It's going to be such and such temperature, there's going to be rain or no rain, we're going to have so much clouds, we're going to have so much wind. And there will be that answer. The big question is, how do we figure that out? And so I think Mother Nature gives us clues to what the atmosphere is going to do. There's a jet stream, we hand plot maps, we look at upper air charts, we look at balloon soundings, we look at modeling. And so I look at it as a big mystery that I have to solve. And it's solving that mystery every day and getting the correct answer that is the challenge. And then from that, making people's life comfortable and helping them because an accurate forecast, when you think about weather impacts all of us every day. It impacts how we feel, it impacts what we eat, it impacts how we dress, it impacts what we drive, it impacts chemicals around us. Every business is impacted by weather, whether their employees can get to work, or Procter & Gamble needed to know temperatures because they used to have cleaning fluids in railroad tanks that they needed to keep at certain temperatures. Even the baseball team, you can't have a pitcher warm up and then have him sit because of a rain delay. He's out for the game, And these are $1 million questions sometimes that people are asking about for their livelihood. Do I go out and bale hay today and take the chance that it's going to rain on me and then I got to, start over again, or it's ruined? So, people really rely on us for an accurate forecast. And for folks to allow me into their home for, 40 plus years is a real honor, to be able to select me out of all the other meteorologists that are out there. So, I'm certainly very honored by that.
All right. Afton, anything else you can think of?
No, but I do want to thank you for coming on and being with us today and giving us a few minutes of your time to share a little bit about what you do and how much you care about the Ozarks.
Well, you're very welcome. Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Well, and the best part of this is at the end of this summer, I hear you're going into retirement.
I am.
Any big plans?
Well, I've always said I need someday to let work stop getting in the way of my messing around, my goofing off. And so, I'm going to do some of those things. I'd like to maybe teach a class. I've talked to one of the local universities about doing that. Certainly I exercise quite a bit. I used to do triathlons. And so, some days, like today, for example, I had to cut the workout short. We got storms tonight. I didn't get home till after midnight last night because of storms. So, I'm going to take some time and smell the roses. I really do love to travel. My father was in the Air Force. I lived in 4 different countries overseas. So I lived 8 years of my life as a child overseas. And so there's, it's a great, big, beautiful world out there, and I want to go see some of it. And, I'd like to do maybe some legal work. There's a huge market for legal work for, weather situations. And so, it can be kind of profitable, but not all the time.
So you're not really retiring. You're just moving directions. You're shifting
your... it's time to do something for me.
Yeah.
And it's time to do something fun and not, television has a daily time limit, right? If I'm not ready at, 10, 15, 22, there's a problem.
Right, yeah.
And you know what? Maybe today I feel like I'm going to be ready at 10:30 or, I want to go to sleep at 10:30. I'm going to do something in the afternoon. So I think that's what I'm going to do. And I've also, found somebody that I'm going to share my life with. And, that's actually been very fleeting. And people don't realize, to find somebody who has your back, that cares for your has your best interest in heart and cares for you and whose time you want to spend with. That's very important. And so I'm going to go take care of that as well.
Well, congratulations on both accounts.
Thank you.
Yeah. So as we've heard today from Ron, weather can be really unpredictable, but being prepared doesn't have to be. And we hope our listeners are taking away the preparedness part of this, if nothing else, especially people with disabilities, knowing to plan ahead and have your emergency evacuation plans in place before the weather hits. So thanks, Ron, for helping our listeners stay safe.
And again, bring down the anxiety level, folks. And really, by remaining calm, you're really going to do yourself a world of good. It's at the end of the day, when you think back over the course of your life, most of us are going to survive these events. And, if we're not going to, then there's nothing that we can do about it. But again, we want to, increase your chances of survival, and that starts with being calm and making good decisions.
All right. On that note,
That's
thank
perfect.
you for your time, and everybody stay safe out there.
All righty.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. If you have any episode ideas or questions, feel free to email us at marketing@empowerabilities.org. You can feel free to listen to us on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Visit our website and get involved.